Welcome to Householders, a conversation about American life as Zen practice. I'm Inga Annie Tudora.
And I'm Kyosaku John Mitchell, and we're lay members of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center.
Well, I had a dream a few nights back, and, it was very vivid, and it did give me a different perspective on my dad's death, I think.
Oh, wow.
So, in the dream, I was actually the one on my deathbed.
Wow.
And I was aware of it. But it's definitely, there was just a new feeling of just being helpless, being powerless in that situation. I think people sometimes think like, oh, if I knew I was gonna die, like, what would you do? And then you think like all these like cool things that you would end up doing,
Mm-hmm.
but like you actually, like, if you were dying, you wouldn't have energy for any of those things.
Mm.
So I was laying there like just in this bed, and other people of course had to take care of me, and I wanted people to come see me because it was literally going to be the last days that I had on this planet. But it just, like, for whatever reason, there weren't a lot of people who could make it.
Mm.
And like, that's hurtful, like,
Yeah.
it's like I'm gonna die and you can't make it out to see me, and I was getting to start thinking because I just had a lot of time to think and I didn't have much energy for anything else. And the idea of being like, well, I'm like, soon I'm not going to be here. I'm like, something's going to happen, and I don't really know what that thing is. And it was a comforting idea to be like, maybe it doesn't just end. Maybe I can come back as something else. Even though I didn't necessarily believe that was true, I wanted to give myself that idea so that I didn't have to think about like just something that's like just ended,
Mm.
And then so there was like these nurses or someone, it was people that like I didn't really know that well, and they were helping me out, and they just were trying to offer me things to make me feel like more comfortable, but they said that it could probably just like make me fall asleep and could end up making it end a lot faster, but I wouldn't be in pain. So, and like I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that.
That sounds
like, that's
familiar.
dumb. Yeah. So like it definitely did, just because it really put myself into that like space of what would it be like to be the one dying. And I can understand like not wanting to necessarily come to terms with your own death, because I don't even know if that's actually going to help you. If what do you don't know what's gonna happen, so that's kind of, what are you coming to terms with anyway? Just that there's something that's gonna happen, you don't know what it is, like. I mean, I think it's just, I could just see that, I could feel it, that it was, that once you're in that position, things could be very different than how you think that you would actually like react to the situation. I don't know if you've ever had dreams like that where you're like, I've never been in this situation, but this dream was so real, like it gave me a new perspective on like what that situation might be like.
Oh yeah, I have certainly, but I feel like there was so much in that description that you just gave that you were just in the situation of, but from the other side. That like, it's I'm that is an experience that I don't feel like I've had, is like, having a dream sort of like show me more about something that I'd just been really close to and really affected by that way.
And I don't know how I know this, but I know that I am going to have to go through that.
Mm.
It means you don't know how you're going to die. Like, you could die in a car accident. It could be quick and you don't have any time to prepare for it. But I don't think that's what's going to happen to me.
Uh-huh. I was really struck by the way you described this like instrumental idea of reincarnation that you were like talking yourself into or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how much of that was conscious inside the dream and how much of it is you describing it in retrospect. Like were you consciously within the situation, like using it instrumentally like that to try and like convince yourself? And that's so interesting to me.
I was thinking about like what might happen because I knew it was going to be coming soon.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, it could just be that I get reincarnated as something else. And that like was like, oh, well, that's not so bad. That could be, fun. I don't know.
So it worked. It like reassured you to think that.
Yeah.
Even as just like an intellectual exercise or something.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Well, I had that equivalent of like, maybe my dad saying like, well, I'm not going to die. And then I guess from that perspective, if he's thinking it from like an intellectual perspective, maybe he's just thinking, well, there's nothing to be afraid of because death isn't really like what you think it's gonna be.
Yeah, like there's a way to say that doesn't mean what it sounds like it means.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, Christians believe that they're going to have eternal life, like, out after they die.
Right.
And, while he was saying that wasn't it could just be like, no, it's not. What are, like, I guess, modern day understanding of how that is how it is.
Or conventional in some way.
Yeah.
One wonders sort of how clear that was in his mind when he said that. And I also wonder how it compares to this sort of simulated experience that you had in this dream. It sounds like a lot of the things that you were preparing for, like it sounds like you were genuinely worried, like you were in it, like in the dream. Is that right? Like you thought, like there wasn't a part of you that was like, this isn't really happening, so I'm not actually worried about it.
No, I was so embodied in the dream.
Yeah.
It was just weird because it just felt like, I really felt like I was physically there.
Mm-hmm.
And like the breaths I took were real because they were the same breaths I would be taking in real life, but they felt
because you were in a bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's enhanced the reality of the situation because I was in a bed and
yeah.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of it as death? Like you were thinking like death? Like you said something about not knowing what's going to happen, but is what you meant that like, okay, death, what does that mean? Like you were confronting like,
right.
What is death? Not like
that's exactly what I was confronting, and I never had thought about it on that level that I have like inside the dream, because it's always in my head, it's always from the perspective of other people dying, and like I see people die, and then you wonder like, well, what happens to them? But it's different when it's you.
Yeah. Did it feel like you were running out of time? Did it feel like there was like a short amount of time in which to sort of straighten this out? Did you feel pressure?
I didn't. Surprisingly, like time felt slower. It felt like I knew that there was a finite amount of time, but like because I wasn't like doing things like, like I wasn't working and doing things. I was laying in a bed the whole time.
Yeah.
Like the time felt like really slow.
Yeah. I feel almost hesitant to say this, having not just like recently been visited by like really close personal death like you have. But there have been times when I mean I've contemplated my own death. I've also sort of had experiences like the one that you described.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess we could probably just say, like, I once had a psychedelic experience that was basically the same experience that you just described. Qualitatively, probably somewhat different, but like, you know, I was on a deathbed. I actually did die in this experience. Like, I experienced like the passing away and like what happened after that. And there was a little bit of that, like, floating above my bed, sort of looking down at my body, watching people, seeing like people react, which is a thing that people have reported a lot, you know, pervasively in what are usually called near-death experiences, right? Like where people are really in a hospital bed and they really do have cardiac arrest or something, and they have like an out-of-body experience where they see and hear and experience things from like a non-local perspective, and then they come back and they can report some of these things. It was a little bit like that. And really that experience was about this sort of letting go of like, okay, like it's now, you know, like it wasn't like I did have a little bit of what's going to happen, but it was like really happening right then. And so I had to work with the sort of allowing it to happen. That was really what the core part of the experience was. But the thing I was getting to, and it was something that had occurred to me before this experience, but since then, definitely I've thought about it this way too. It's like, there's a part of me that feels like I will be relieved to be in the situation where like, that's all that's left, you know? And of course it depends on the pain and the circumstances and, you know, the people I'm leaving behind and all of those difficult details. But I think for me that there's always been like a ... and then I'm going to die someday, like to like every burden and anxiety and thing that I've had. And so like part of me looks at that time of just like all that is left to do is the one great thing that it must be done in life as like a relief of other burdens. And some of my experience of like the intensity and like franticness of the passage of time in my everyday life feels like that's like sort of the thing that it feels like I'm going to be able to put down someday, like when it's really time. Yeah. And I'm not saying I look forward to that or something, but
no.
Does that resonate at all with what it sounds like?
I guess
you were going through?
You know, I've always considered myself someone to not be very upset by death. And I think up until now, that would probably be the case. And I have lost like people very close to me, like, and just, you know, friends, colleagues, and family members and stuff. You know, I may have talked about this on the show. My ex died in a car accident. We had just broken up. So, you know, I know some people might say like, oh, well, that makes it easier, right? I'm like, why would that make it easier? That almost makes it worse, really. But I don't know. It's not easier, I promise. He was very protective of me, especially because I was going through just really horrible experience with lupus while we were together. And so he got like overprotective of me, and he wouldn't really like just his main focus was like taking care of me, you know. And eventually like I started getting better, and I'm like, I really don't want you treating me like this, you know, like it feels overbearing and feels like I can't do certain things without your approval and that kind of stuff. And that's when I was like, just need to get out of here. But of course, like after I left, I think, everybody says like, well, that's a good thing, because it's like he did start doing stuff that he wanted to do after that, because he wouldn't do anything that he wanted to do while we were together. So he like joined a band, and like and then he went on tour with that band, and that's actually when he died. So he the driver of their van or whatever they were traveling in fell asleep at the wheel and hit a tree, and Paul flew out the window. And he wasn't the only one that died, actually, so it was very tragic. I didn't know anybody else on that bus. But I guess what I was gonna say about that is like I spent like 3 years with him, and somehow it just wasn't the same, and it wasn't like as life altering as literally just being there and watching like my dad die.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if people die just quickly and randomly, like it's sudden and it's horrible, but it saves you from having to be there emotionally while they're fading and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna say, why I said that story at all, there was a point. Sometimes I forget in the middle of it, but the reason I said that is because I think that I more closely understand death than I did back then.
Yeah, sure. I believe that.
And it's given me such a different perspective that before I feel like I was trivializing it. Or like I just didn't understand. I didn't understand it.
How much would you say that new awareness changed what it felt like to experience personally? I mean, I realize that this is kind of an unprecedented thing that this dream was for you, but like, surely something has changed in how you anticipate your own death in light of what happened with your father. Like, did anything about that show up in the dream? And like, did it shine any light on sort of what's changed for how you think how you feel about it for yourself? Like, obviously it's become so much more real and personal and up close and slow. And I mean, you said a lot of things about the difference between like being there with someone dying slowly and like having it happen in that sort of freak accident situation.
Yeah.
But like, the dream put you in the situation of the second case.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything new or surprising about your own attitude about your own death that showed up in that dream?
I mean, I think that I've always felt this, but the dream sort of reinforced it, and my experience has sort of reinforced it, that obviously you have a finite amount of time on this planet. Yeah. And I happen to really like being on this planet, even the bad days.
Mm-hmm.
I like those too. But we gotta spend this time wisely.
Yeah.
And it's, even though I think that I have a really good job, most of my life I'm spending looking at a computer screen.
Yeah.
And
relatable.
I just really want to do things that make me happy And I know you have to, it's like inevitable, you have to like do these things that don't make you happy just so you can do some of the things that make you happy. And I just really hate this so much. Like I just wish that there was another way to go about this, but I'm just much more aware about how finite of a time that I have on here. And it's not like I'm trying to accomplish more. I'm just trying to do things that I love doing. And, you know, in the dream, what I wanted to do in that dream was for people to come visit me. And I mean, I really do think that, like, the connections you make are probably like the most significant. If you just like sit in a room by yourself, I just don't think that that's going to be a fulfilling life. And honestly, that's what I'm doing right now. So I do talk to people like on the internet.
Yeah, there's trade-offs, right? And like, I don't know, I believe it's at least possible to have a quality of human connection online that is at least different or unique, like relative to, you know, the options I've had in other like in-person social contexts, but not necessarily better or more fulfilling or more satisfying. And I agree with you that that's sort of the key thing about life. And maybe it's like, maybe there's no better indication of that than the way that the death experience shows up in our dreams, but also maybe I think it's just pretty normal to imagine being in the situation you were dreaming about. And the good version is being surrounded by people, right?
Yeah.
That's like the difference between a good death and a bad one in our sort of thin mythology that
Sure.
like our culture has about death.
Yeah, I mean, I do think about like, well, when you die, if you are in this type of situation, I mean, you know, I usually men die before women, but like, you know, anything could happen. Maybe your wife's there, maybe your children are there, you know, maybe their children are there. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of situation that is for me. It's like, I guess it could be some of my nieces and nephews because I spend a lot of time with them, but I'm not going to have children. So it's just going to be people younger than me that I know. And most of my friends are older than me and most of my siblings are older than me. So I don't know.
Is that the only thing on your list? Like people, like is there?
No, there's the creativity. We were talking about this, like, you know, the last couple times too. Like that's extremely important to me. But what I'm seeing is that while I do want time for artwork, I don't want nearly as much time for just artwork as I do for doing creative stuff with other people.
Uh-huh.
And it's not even necessarily about the connection that I'm making with those other people as much as like the collaboration, the feeling of like doing something together, the together creation. Me just painting by myself doesn't give me that same feeling, but I still like to do it. So it's not, you know.
It's like it's not just about knowing people. It's about making an impact, making a change, putting something into the world that you couldn't do by yourself. That sort of like makes a meaning to your life that's bigger than you.
That's how I, in some ways, connect to people.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hang out with my nieces and nephews, the most fun they have is when we're making things together.
Yeah.
You know, we've done like pinhole camera experiments. We made tons and tons of short films. So those are all very lovely and hilarious. And, I have all sorts of ideas of things we could do together, just, creating. And because we're not just creating the object of the creation, but they're going to remember that because it was different and interesting, and it stimulated the brain, and it gave you the feeling that life had variety and thoughtfulness in it.
Yeah. And there's also the quality of just like the association with you and that thing. I feel like those are very immediate, like in my memory of people I know who have died. One of the first things that always comes to mind when I think of them is like anything that we did together, not just creatively, but like also like on any adventure we went on.
Yeah.
They're like identical with that experience. And yeah, definitely it's not like scenes of sitting on the couch doing nothing. It's like,
yeah, watching a movie. I mean, maybe if it's like a really memorable movie in y'all's heads,
yeah.
like you
right.
quote it
or,
all the time.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah, exactly. One that we watched 100 times. Yeah.
It's got to just be a little more interactive than just watching it, though.
Yeah. Do you ever think about the fact that you and I are putting our voices out there in like a very data portable format that will probably be there like as long as the internet exists, and that these conversations will kind of create people in the minds of people who live like way after we're dead? Has that ever been your mind?
I never really think of myself as being that significant.
Yeah, but it's like if any one person is looking for like conversations about meditation and whatever, Zen and the art of making movies, whatever we've talked about, they could find this. I'm not talking about the same thing that like, it's not at all the same kind of thing that I imagine for like a show that's like super popular that has like fans that talk about it all day and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like the opposite of that. It's like some one Zen person in the year 2100 listening to us and like imagining us and being able to like see our pictures and hear our voices. Like, isn't that super intimate compared to like what we have of, there's like a few Zen people from the generation before us that we have this kind of audio fidelity of.
I mean, it's true. I mean, we're supposed to have audio recordings of Matsuo Kuroshi, but like I haven't heard them. They're like on cassette tapes or something like that.
Yeah, since it keeps telling me that he's gonna do something about that, and that I'll get my hands on them eventually, and then I can put them on the internet so that people will be able. I mean, like I've only heard like 10 seconds of his voice myself, like in videos. But the thing about this medium of like personal deep conversation one-on-one, I just feel like you get so much of the people from this kind of thing. There are podcasts that I've listened to for like 10 years, and I feel like I know those people really well,
Mm-hmm.
And like, well, if they died, I could imagine myself like listening to them from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have some recordings of my dad. Well, I mean, I have like video footage, but he actually liked to send video recordings just as a message, and I have like 5 of them saved. And he's just like, hey, honey, I was, doing this today and thought about you or something like that. And yeah, I have them, you know. I'm
Mhm.
like, if I want to watch them later, like it really means a lot to have that.
Householders is a production of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Silent Thunder Order. Find us on the web ataszc.org.
Our Sangha depends on your support. You can donate by PayPal to donate at storder.org. Gasho.